Good morning, all. From today onwards, we are starting a lecture series on food processing. In this lecture series, the various aspects of post harvest processing of agricultural crops will be discussed. Today, we are having a very important topic, that is the drying and dehydration of the food materials. You know that drying is a important unit operation which is performed on the agricultural crops after they are harvested. We know that most of the crops they are harvested at higher moisture content level. It is done because if the crop is over dried, then at the time of its harvesting, whether it is done manually or it is done with the help of some machine or by mechanical means, there are chances of the shattering of the grains in the field, and this way there are losses. So in order to prevent the losses, the crops are harvested at higher moisture content, and later on they are dried before they are being stored. The harvesting moisture content for different commodities is different, but in most of the cases it is in the range of around 17% to 25%. So, in order to ensure the longer storage life of a commodity, the removal of moisture from the commodity is very essential. We know that if the commodity is stored at high moisture level, there are chances of infection by the microorganisms, because the presence of moisture in a commodity encourages the activity of the microorganisms. So, we can safely say that if the water activity of the commodity is lower, then there are lesser chances of microbial infection in stored food grain. So, one way of preserving the agricultural commodity is to remove moisture from it. So, we can say that the commodity, when moisture from it is removed, it has more useful life. So basically, if we discuss what is the harvesting moisture content and what is the level of the moisture content recommended for its long term preservation. Say, for example, wheat. In case of wheat, the moisture content at the time of harvest is in between 16 to 18%. It is at the time of harvesting. Now, if we want to store the wheat grains for around 6 month duration, 6 month storage life, then we need to reduce its moisture by 12%, up to 12%. And if we want to store it for 1 year or longer period, 1 year or more, then its moisture content should be reduced to 10%. In case of paddy, the moisture content at the time of harvest is around 20 to 22%. And for its safe storage, For 6 month duration, the moisture content should be reduced to 12%. And for 1 year or more duration storage, its moisture should be reduced to around 10%. It is in case of paddy. Now, in case of maize, the harvesting moisture content is around 20 to 23%, and for 6 month storage it should be reduced to around 12%, and for longer period, that is around for 1 year and more than 1 year duration, it should be reduced to 10%. While in case of mustard, the moisture content at the time of the moisture content for the safe storage for 6 to 12 months, it should be around 8%, and for higher duration the moisture content should be around 6%. So this way we find that every commodity have a optimum moisture content for its long storage life. Now we will discuss the drying process. So drying is a very important unit operation which is performed on the harvested grains before it is being stored for future use. So drying is a unit operation in which the moisture content from the grain or other agricultural commodity is reduced to reach a predetermined level that is considered safe for its storage. So what we want drying is, it is basically a thermophysical or thermochemical process in which the moisture is removed, moisture present in grain. Grain is basically hygroscopic in nature. Hygroscopic means a grain may gain moisture from outside or it may lose moisture from inside depending upon the surrounding condition. So basically drying is a process of removal of moisture from a hygroscopic commodity like grain to a predetermined level. And that predetermined is level basically safe for long storage. So basically, if you look at the drying process, it is basically heat and mass transfer operation. What happens during this process? Heat is supplied to the grain and which results in the removal of moisture content or moisture present in the food material. So basically it is a heat and mass transfer process. When we are designing a drying system, we need to take the grain into consideration, because we know that grain is a living entity. If the drying operations are performed at a very high temperature, then it may cause the loss of nutrition and of grain, and there are chances of over drying which may result in the poor quality of the product. So the designing of a drying system should be done very carefully. Second operation in agricultural processing is the dehydration. Dehydration. Dehydration is also a thermophysical or thermochemical process in which the heat is supplied to the grain, and consequently there is a removal of moisture from the grain. But the only difference is that in drying process the moisture is removed up to a certain predetermined level, that is safe for their storage. While in case of the dehydration, entire water is removed from the food material. So basically at the end what we get the dry matter. Or we can say that dehydration is a process in which the moisture content of the agricultural commodity or grain is reduced to a very low level, usually to the bone dry condition. Clear? A bone dry material is that material from which all the moisture has been removed. So in case we can say that the bone dry material have the zero moisture content. So if you compare the dehydration with the drying process, then we find that more amount of energy and time is required in dehydration process. More energy required, and it is a time consuming process also. Process also. Clear? Now we will discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the moisture removal from the grain material. So basically advantages includes many things. First is the crop can be harvested earlier when it is having higher moisture content, so as to avoid the losses during the harvesting. Later on, the harvested crop can be dried, and that way there is a saving of the grain in the process. Second one is the long term storage of the food grain is possible because of the lower moisture content available for the growth of microorganisms. There are lesser chances of spoilage in the commodity during the storage. The proper drying methods, if they are adopted, they help in preservation of the nutrition in the food grain also. If we are storing the grains for the purpose of for sowing in the next season, drying helps in preserving or enhancing its viability also. By the drying process, we can produce the products of high economic values. For example, the dried product have higher value in the market in comparison to the wet products. We can also convert the waste products which are obtained in agricultural processing into the useful products also. As we know that any process, it is not free from the disadvantages. The first disadvantage of the drying process is the cost involved in it. We know that for drying process, which is done mostly with the help of some heating element, some media which is at higher temperature. So it add to the cost of the product. So mostly the dried product they are costly in comparison to the fresh products. It is only because lot of fuel or electricity is consumed in the drying operation. The second one is the initial cost for setting up of a drying system is very high. A drying system contains the dryer, the source of heat, or that is the fuel cost, and storage units also. So that way, lot of initial investment is required if we go for the drying of the agricultural commodity. There is a risk of over drying also. Over drying of a grain reduces its quality and thus leads to the economic losses to the processor. Last but not the least, lot of labor is required for performing these operations. So that way it makes the process costlier and the dye products they are having more prices in market in comparison to their counterpart. So with these words we finish the introductory part of our lecture series on drying and dehydration. Thank you.